Hey, how are you? Good afternoon from New York City. And it's my very special privilege today to be talking to you with my friend here who's visiting me, Dr. Anoop Kumar. And I'm waiting for all of you to come on board. So we have a lot of exciting things to share with you. You've seen Anoop and me on previous occasions, and Anoop is the author of a book called Michelangelo's Medicine. So I wanted, my friend Rishikesh Dikshit says, hello Anoop sir.
Hi Rishikesh.
Yeah, he's always here. So, hi Rishikesh. So Anoop, before we talk about what we're going to talk about today, it's too bad I don't have your book here with me. I've given away a few copies to my friends because I loved it so much. But can you talk a little bit about what is your book, Michelangelo's Medicine, about? And by the way, if you go to his website, which is right here, you can look up Anoop's website, then you can also get the book. So tell me a little bit about why you wrote Michelangelo's Medicine, and basically also you need to know that Anoop is a doctor. He works in the emergency room at a hospital. So Anoop is a medical doctor trained trained in emergency medicine with a background in all the sciences, especially biology. So what's your book about?
So the subtitle of the book is actually How Redefining the Human Body Will Transform Health and Healthcare. And so what I do is look at the human body not just from a physical perspective, which is how we look at most of the world and how we look at human anatomy in medical school and generally in science, but also look at it from a deeper level. So we start with the physical, but then we look at the mental level, at the energetic and informational level, and ultimately that which supports all of these constructs, the construct of information and energy and mind and matter, and that's consciousness. So looking at the full range of what it means to be a human being.
How does this help us in treating people with sickness, injury? I know you're an emergency room physician, so you use physical interventions all the time. How does this deeper understanding help us treat people, understand their illnesses, and make them feel better?
Well, it opens up our range of diagnoses and range of treatments. Because if I'm looking at something as only a physical thing, then I'm looking at physical diagnoses and physical treatments. If I'm seeing it also as a mental process, then I'm also looking at mental diagnoses, mental treatments, and on and on. We're just on the border of looking at energetic diagnoses and treatments, informational diagnoses and treatments, and ultimately at the level of consciousness itself. And at that level, we're talking about wholeness and what it means to be whole. So it is possible to have a process going on, a process of imbalance happening at the physical or mental level, but yet to be whole. And that's an important aspect, because once we get to the root of the whole thing, to that level of wholeness, then that can also percolate up into the grosser aspects of existence, like energy, mind, and matter.
So if you want to know more about Anoop's ideas on healing, on health, on illness, on the cure for illness, or the cure, or you might say treatment. Some people don't like the word cure, but the treatment of any form of human suffering, I really suggest that you read his book once again. The book is called Michelangelo's Medicine, and if you want to know more about it, then please check out Anoop's website. But the real reason we're doing now this Facebook Live at this moment is to invite you to a debate this evening in New York City that starts at 7 p.m. So Anoop and I are partners in the debate on one side, and on the other side we have Michael Shermer, whom, as you know, I've known now for 30 years, and we've jousted in the past, sometimes very acrimoniously, and sometimes in a very unfriendly manner, where most of the time we've been talking past each other. But thanks to Michael Shermer's wife, she recently brought Michael, when I say recently, 2 years ago or more, to the center, and Michael Shermer is now beginning to communicate with me, and I'm also beginning to communicate with him more respectfully. And so this debate today is going to be very interesting. On his side, joining him is Heather Berlin, who is also a friend of ours, and she's a neuroscientist. And they are arguing for the motion, which is?
The more we evolve, the less we need God.
So Michael Shermer and Heather Berlin are for the motion. The more we evolve, the less we need God. And of course, Anoop and I are arguing for the other side. The more we evolve, the more we need God. And so, of course, the whole question will rest on what is it that we mean when we use the word God. So because we want you all to join the debate, okay? Because we all want you to join the debate, and because the debate will be live streamed. By the way, we have people from Iraq. Mohammed, nice to have you from Iraq. And do watch our debate, okay? So we are going to argue that God is needed for evolution and our evolution. And of course, Michael Shermer and Heather Berlin are saying no. So, of course, we are not going to give away our talking points. We want you to join the debate. If you see all the links here, they're right here on this broadcast, telecast, Facebook Live, whatever. The links are there. You can watch the debate, but you can also vote online during the debate, before the debate, after the debate. And this debate will live on the internet for a long time. Amir, where and when to watch the debate? The links are right there below this, on this particular page. So check out the link. So we are requesting you once again to join us. And go to those links, vote before the debate, during the debate, and then post-debate. And then we'll go from there. Okay? So, because we're not going to give away our points right now, I thought I should engage with Anoop right now on some issues that are extremely important to me. And we are doing this on my dining table in my apartment. And so there happen to be a bunch of books here, which are some of my favorite books. And I would say, let's talk about each of these books. I have some questions, Anoop, and this will give us some insight, and people who are watching us some insight into the nature of how we think, without us giving away anything about the debate, because we don't want to steal the thunder of the organizers who've organized this debate. And the organization is called IQ2, right?
Yeah, Intelligence Squared US.
In Intelligence Squared US, and they have a global presence, and you'll enjoy seeing the debate online, and I hope you'll participate with your vote. And we are not telling you which side to vote on. Vote on the side you feel agrees with you, or where you feel yourself aligned. So I've been reading this book, okay? Why Do We Sleep? Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Matthew Walker. He's a neuroscientist and professor of neuroscience and psychology at UC Berkeley. And by the way, I recommend books that I'm reading if I enjoy them. So this is a very enjoyable book, Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. just so you know, I have an app that measures my sleep every day. And yesterday my sleep score was 94 out of 100, and I scored very well on both deep sleep and dream sleep. And this is a very important book because it says how sleep improves learning, how sleep improves mood and energy levels, how sleep regulates hormone levels, and how sleep prevents cancer, many types of Alzheimer's, diabetes, how sleep slows the effect of aging, increases longevity, enhances the education and lifespan of our children, and boosts our efficiency, success, and productivity. A lot of benefits at every level of our biology and our psychology, of our emotional well-being, just from something we do every day, which is sleep. So this is a scientific perspective on why sleep is important. But because Anoop is here, and he and I come from a similar background of our understanding of reality. Anoop, what is sleep from a spiritual perspective?
So sleep is a state in which the mind is no longer projecting experience. So if we can talk about the three states of experience, right? You can picture like a triangle, and we might call this the waking state.
Right now.
Right now.
What I call the vivid lucid dream right now, but go ahead.
Exactly. And then another form is the dream state, and then the third state will be called the deep sleep state or sleep state. And we spend our entire lives circulating among these three states: waking, dream, sleep. If we look at them more closely, we'll see that dream and waking are actually quite similar, which is why Deepak calls this the lucid dream state, because both dream and waking involve the projection of experience. So whether I'm dreaming or whether I'm awaking, I have a localized presence as a personality, and we call him Anoop, and that's the character which lives in this projection. When the projection shifts in a dream, then my identity shifts from this character to that character in that dream projection, and the similar things happen. There's an entire dream universe that's formed. But deep sleep is of a different nature. In deep sleep, the projective quality of mind is withdrawn, so that there's no more any experience projected, but in fact the only thing that's there is the absence of experience. And what's unique about that is that the absence of experience is itself experienceable, meaning that when we wake up, we're able to say, oh, I slept well, right? How do we know we slept well? Because there's still an awareness there in sleep. It's not aware of anything. It's not aware of a character or a universe or a projection or any objects, but awareness itself is there. And that's why when we wake up and the character comes back into projection, the character can still access that consciousness and say, ah, yes, I slept well, or there was something there that made me feel well. But we can't name it because it's not a concept. There's no projection there. There's no thing, there's no character, there's no identity. But we know we slept well. So that fundamental awareness is the same whether we're talking about waking, dream, or sleep. Sleep just happens to be the one where there are no concepts or images or identities projected.
So Anoop, in deep sleep, you said there's no projection of experience. How does this understanding relate to that which humans call death, physical death? Is there a connection?
Yes, there is a connection. And remember, whenever we're talking about things like mental experience or physical experience, such as physical death, what we're talking about is actually what happens to form. So when I say physical death, like let's say I saw somebody who died at the age of 100 years old. So what we're actually saying is that that particular perception of a physical form, first of all, that physical form stops moving. That's what we call death. When a physical image stops moving, it's called death. That's why when physicians, when we look and we determine if somebody died, you check the heart and you see that the heart is no longer moving. You can check the pupillary reflex and you see that the pupillary muscles are no longer moving. And those are two of the ways.
Brain waves.
Brain. And you look at brain waves, so you can look at functional imaging as well. But basically, when all of these activities subside, that's called death. Now, how does that relate to awareness itself? Well, what dies are particular forms. What dies are particular perceptions. We can call them physical at one level, because this feels solid, so I'd say it's physical. But of course, in a dream state, we can see that this very same thing is a mental perception. Either way, whether we're talking about a physical form or a mental perception, whenever that activity stops and stills, we call that death.
So, you said sometimes when we wake up and we say, I've had a really good sleep, I feel refreshed, I feel fresh. Sleep is refreshing. And when we look at babies, we say they're very fresh. Have they just come from this state of deep sleep? What is projecting as that baby?
So when a person wakes up and says, I feel fresh, what is really saying that? It's the mind, the localized mind, the character in the mind, the personality of the mind that says, oh, I, the mind, feel fresh. Why? Because I, the mind, was full of so many projections before I went to sleep 8 hours ago. I had the projection of myself as this person in, having these activities, having these relationships, having this checklist of to-do things. There were so many projections filling my mind. And then I went to sleep and my mind stopped projecting anything. And now, I woke up and it's like I'm clear. Well, it's like when you clear your glasses. You wipe off your glasses. All those smudges go away. You can take a fresh breath and you can say, I'm clear, I slept well. When we're talking about babies, what happens is that they don't buy into all of our constructs yet. So they haven't smudged their glasses yet, so they're not looking through the fog yet. So there's a deep part of a baby, actually of all of us, but babies recognize it more. There's a deeper part of the baby's psyche that is always asleep. There's a deeper aspect of us that is always asleep, in the sense that it's not projecting. The vast majority of this mind is not projecting anything. But because we're zeroed in on the projection, it seems like everything is projection.
Like the crest of the wave of the ocean.
Like the crest of the wave, or like an iceberg. If you look above the surface, there's a huge iceberg. But if you look below, it's actually much more vast below the surface. But we're so used to looking above that level of awareness. So with babies, there's a deeper part of their psyche that's ever in that deeper state that we would call sleep. Of course, their forms aren't sleeping, but they're not as attached to their forms and dependent on their forms as most adults are, because they haven't yet developed that
their
tendency.
forms aren't sleeping as experienced by other people, but their forms are not present to
in
them.
the same way. Right. They're not present they're not calcified like they are for most adults, because we've bought into our beliefs so much that we've kind of become encrusted within them. But most babies are not like that. That's why they're so... And it reflects in their bodies, right? They're limber, they're bouncy.
And that's why all these benefits from sleep that I just
exactly.
read, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, I was schooled by a great teacher of Vedanta, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he would say that it is possible to be aware of being aware while asleep. What do you say to that?
I say absolutely, because again, awareness of the waking state means awareness of projection. Awareness of the dream state is basically awareness of a projection. Similarly, we can be aware of sleep too, but it's the awareness of the absence of projection. You don't have to be aware of something, one can just be awareness. And so in deep sleep state, it is just awareness without an objectification. The awareness doesn't roll onto itself as an objectification. It just stays in its pristine, naked form.
Does this understanding in any way help somebody overcome the fear of death?
It absolutely does, because again, when we're talking about death, we're talking about mental forms. Or we can say we're talking about forms, whether they're perceived as physical or whether they're perceived as mental. So if we're able to see that our deeper nature is awareness, then forms can come and go, right? Just like if I have a sofa in my apartment, and let's say it's old and dilapidated, so I might ask the movers to come take it out. So that form has quote-unquote died, at least to my awareness. That form is gone. I can bring another form, right? Or if I have an ice cube in my glass right here, and I swirl it, after a while the ice cube dies and water is born instead, right? The form changes. But I am aware of that form changing. I'm not the form, I'm aware of the form changing. So therefore, if my identification is not with the form, the coming and going of the form, the birth and death of the form, is not really about me, it's about the form. So that's where it comes in, this awareness that's aware of waking projection, dream projection, and sleep withdrawal. The awareness that's aware of all these is not subject to birth and death.
So the experience, the projection, whatever that is being born and is dying in an eternal now. But that what we call now is the awareness in which birth and death are a continuum. So, death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth, and life is the continuum of birth and death. Would you say that's...
Yeah, I say it's absolutely true. Birth and death are opposites, but life really doesn't have an opposite, right? What is the opposite of life? I don't know. I mean, life is what appears as all these experiences.
And then disappears and reappears again.
Right.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Now, this is another book I've been reading that I recommend to people. It's called Quantum Questions, Mystical Writings of the World's Greatest Physicists. And by Jove, I see my own quote there. It says, I read Ken Wilber every day. So I'll modify that to say, I used to read Ken Wilber every day, and I still think he's one of the greatest thinkers of our time. He's been called the Einstein of consciousness. And so in this particular quote, I said I read Ken Wilber every day so I can be inspired by the most extraordinary mind of our times. And so here are some very interesting, he talks about some of the greatest physicist philosophers of all time, including Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Einstein, de Broglie, Sir James Jeans, Max Planck, Wolfgang Pauli, and Sir Arthur Eddington. It's a great book, and I've enjoyed it over the years. And if you want to know what some of the greatest minds have said over decades and even in the last century, I highly recommend this book. But I'm going to read something from one of the physicists here, right in the beginning. And here's a quote that is from the book. And the quote is the following. Rather, the physicist is looking at nothing but a set of highly abstract differential equations, not at reality itself, but at mathematical symbols of reality. As Niels Bohr put it, it must be recognized that we are here dealing with a purely symbolic procedure. Elsewhere, Heisenberg says that when we do science and look at nature, we're not looking at nature as she reveals herself to us, but at nature as she is revealed by the questions we ask. So essentially, a lot of these physicists who are amazing thinkers are saying that everyday reality is a symbolic manifestation or a symbolic equivalent of our essential being. Can you kind of elaborate on that, Anoop?
Yeah. So any object we look at, we can look at different levels. So here's my hand, and my hand at one level is a physical structure. So it's firm and solid, and I can describe the anatomy of the bones and muscles and tendons And then at a deeper level, as the mind becomes more subtle, that very physical thing is also a mental perception, right? Because if I take away the perception, the visual perception, and the tactile perception, then all of a sudden the hand disappears. So the hand is both physical and mental, depending on the frame of mind. If I look at it still deeper, we can say that it's a form of energy, right? Because there's a vibrational dimension to this hand, right? There's an informational dimension to this hand. So all of these are aspects or dimensions or levels of subtlety of the hand. Physical, mental, energetic, informational. But no matter which level we look at it, as long as we're talking about something that we can name, something that we can perceive or conceive, then that ultimately is still symbolic. Because ultimately what has to be there to perceive any of these levels of subtlety is a fundamental field of consciousness. Without consciousness, there's no such thing as information. Without consciousness, there's no such thing as energy, as mind, or as physicality. So because consciousness is primary, and because all of the other aspects are modifications of or experiences in consciousness, they are all symbolic in that sense.
Is my body a symbolic representation of consciousness?
There's no exception to this rule. So the body, yes, absolutely would be. Because we can perceive your body and conceive of your body, it also fits as a symbol. So anything, even something very abstract, like if I were to say a statistical probability wave, right? It's extremely abstract. And yet, we still know what we're saying when we say that. I use those words very particularly, a statistical probability wave. That means they really mean something to me. That means it's a mental construction. And therefore, again, it's symbolic. Whether I'm talking about the very plain sofa I see right in front of me, or a statistical probability wave, if I can conceive of it or perceive it, it is symbolic.
So people were asking what book was I taking the quote from. It's Quantum Questions, Mystical Writings of the World's Greatest Physicists by Ken Wilber. Okay, the next book I want to just briefly share with you is called The Third Jesus, and I wrote it. And, I'm taking a group of people to Europe, and we are, amongst other things, we are going to the Vatican, and so I thought I'd say a few words about the third Jesus, because I'm going to be using this as a text for some of the people that I'm going with. So in this book, I talk about the third Jesus. The first Jesus is the historical Jesus, of which we know very little, by a historian called Josephus. He has about three lines in one paragraph about the historical Jesus. The second is the theological Jesus, which is built by the doctrine that came out of the teachings of Jesus. But the third Jesus is a state of consciousness that we can all aspire to. So in this book, I talk about what Jesus said about love and grace, what he said about faith, revelation, redemption, what he said about the self, what he said about meditation, contemplation, prayer, and even karma. As you sow, so shall you reap. What he said about the world as illusion, and what he said about unity consciousness. So if you're inclined to think of reality through the lens of Christian thought, this is one of my books. And in that line, I've written many books that talk about God. This is called How to Know God, and it basically says that how we experience God depends on our state of consciousness. So if we are in the fight-flight response, then God is a dysfunctional parent. If we are in the reactive response, then God is the God that is very reactive, judges and punishes. If we are in the restful awareness response, then God is the peace that passes understanding. If we are in the intuitive response, then God helps us go beyond duality, understanding, how poles of opposite experience are fundamental to all experience. If we are in the creative response, then God is the experience of that which creates the experience of space-time and causality. If we are in the archetypal or visionary response, then God is higher consciousness, represented by all the symbols. See that painting behind me is a symbolic representation of our own consciousness, but as projected to God. And if we are in the sacred response, then God is unmanifest, intangible, inconceivable, not perceptible, borderless, formless. What Tagore said, when the great poet Tagore, he said, "In this playhouse of infinite forms, I caught sight of the formless." And so my life was blessed. And then I also wrote this book called The Future of God, which is really more about how, as we evolve, our understanding of God also evolves. In other words, God is our highest instinct to know ourselves. Here's another book, The Radiance Sutras, by a friend of mine called Lauren Roche, 112 Gateways to the Yoga of Wonder and Delight. And these are the teachings of Lord Shiva to Shakti, or the goddess. Shiva is pure consciousness, and the goddess is the movement in that pure being that results in manifestation. So I'll only ask you to comment on one sutra that comes from the Shiva Sutras. I'd like your insight, Anoop. Okay. It's one of my favorite sutras. It says, Lord Shiva, he says, meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. Just those two sentences. Meditate on your body as the universe and as having the nature of awareness. Can you say a few words about this?
I think one of the most amazing things about consciousness is that if in fact what we're talking about is true, if in fact this world is made of consciousness, if in fact consciousness is primary, then it also would be incredibly powerful, right? Just because we see so many powerful things, just forces of nature like tornadoes and tsunamis, wind, fire, water, all of the things that are such powerful forces in nature. But if in fact we're saying that consciousness is primary, then that should even be more powerful than these forces of nature. And this is really the beauty of meditation to me. So meditate on your body. So to me, if we simply place attention on the body and do nothing else, not trying to do something with it or make it somewhere or trying to become somebody or something, just rest the attention on the body, you will see that what happens is the body becomes more and more and more subtle. More and more subtle. So it's almost like you will see it going from the physical to the mental, to the energetic, to the informational, and all of a sudden it'll almost be like, what am I? Or where am I? Or am I even? Right? So this is the power of this sutra. So meditate on yourself as if you are awareness. Meditate on your body. As you bring attention on the body, remember we're saying consciousness is primary, so attention and the body are not actually two different things. But it seems like they are because of a misconception in the mind. So then I bring attention as if it's something else, and I rest it on the body or in the body or as the body. And what happens is that the imaginary boundary between the two dissolves. And what dissolves can only be false. And so it's the physicality, the form, the density that dissolves into nothingness.
And that's the entire universe is born.
That's the entire universe, because once you go past a locality, once you go past a particular boundary, then there's no limitation. So that encompasses all forms, all expressions.
And then there's this book which I've talked to you so many times here. You are the universe discovering your cosmic self and why it matters. And basically it ends with the idea that everything we experience is qualia. And then we create constructs around those qualia that we call mind, body, and the physical universe. So qualia is, let me give you an example. The color red is a qualia. The taste of wine is a qualia. The smell of garlic is a qualia. The bitterness of disappointment is a qualia. The feeling of love is a qualia. Qualia simply means quality of awareness. Is the world made of qualia or quanta?
Quanta are made of qualia, and qualia are activities in consciousness. So what we call quanta, like my hand, right? To me, it's a sensation of firmness and of softness, and you can feel some boniness and fleshiness. All these aspects are there. But when we want to quantify them, when I want to say, well, exactly how much firmness is there, then I can give you a number of centimeters, right? I can give you a depth and a width and a length. So these quanta are aspects of the qualia. If I don't perceive it to begin with, if I don't perceive firmness as a qualia, I can never apply the grid work of quanta onto that. I can never superimpose measurement onto something that I don't perceive. So qualia precede quanta. Quanta is a modification of what we call qualia, but in turn qualia itself is a modification of undifferentiated consciousness.
I might even go further, but I totally agree with you. So, if you look up the literature and would say what is the definition of quanta, it says it's the fundamental irreducible unit of energy in which waves of energy are emitted or absorbed. So that's a quantification in a sense of an experience, right?
Yeah.
The smallest units of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So quanta is the measurement of qualia, you would say?
It's a subset of qualia.
So now, this is the concise Yoga Vasishtha by Swami Venkatashananda. And here's one sutra, so much richness in these texts. Rest in being, fully awake, with the calmness of deep sleep, seeing the body and world as a dreamscape.
Beautiful.
I'll repeat that. Rest in being, fully awake, with the calmness of deep sleep. It comes back to our original discussion, the state of deep sleep. Seeing the body and the world as a dreamscape. I think this needs no explanation.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many people know the story of Vasishtha and Ram. So, Ram is in Indian traditions, Hindu traditions, the incarnation of God, almost the same status as Jesus Christ. And Ram is sent by his father to the great seer Vasishtha. And when he encounters him, as is the tradition in India, he touches the feet of the great master. And Vasishtha withdraws and says, "Don't do that, you're God." And Ram says, "I might be God, but I have forgotten. So I came to you to help me remember." And that's the whole teaching of the Yoga Vasishtha. But I'm going to read another sutra here, and I would like you to comment. It says, "The world appearance is the waking state of consciousness. Egotism is the dreaming state. The mind stuff is the deep sleep state as pure consciousness, unconditioned truth." Do you want to comment on that sutra?
You just see it right here. So the world appearance is the waking state of consciousness. Yeah, so this is at a little bit more modified kind of level. It's saying that the world appearance is a waking state. So particularly when the individual wakes up is a perspective this is taking. When an individual wakes up, then according to my own nature, my own tendencies, my own desires, then I perceive that kind of world. Because, of course, the three of us, if we look at the world, we each see a slightly different flavor.
By the way, Corey's interrupting, and Corey says, dreaming is the ego state. Yes, because the ego itself is a dream, right?
Right. And dreaming is still the ego state because our localized identity gets transferred, right? When we dream, we are still in that dream, even though the entire dream is our own consciousness, but we take a localized aspect of that dream, and that becomes our dream character. So the ego is born into that dream. So that's what this is saying here. Egotism is the dreaming state. Mind stuff is the deep sleep state. So here it's referring to deep sleep, but not being aware of that sleep. It's sleep as the mind being asleep to itself. So it's like when I sleep, but I don't even know I'm sleeping. I'm just...
The stuff of the mind.
It's the stuff of the mind. The dross of the mind still covers up the awareness that normally illumines through the mind. So this waking state is that consciousness illumining through the mind as this. Dream state is consciousness illumining through the mind as a dream state. In deep sleep state, if that consciousness is, if the identity hasn't become subtle to stay at the level of consciousness, then what we call the dross of the mind or the identifications of the mind cover it up. That's why many times sleep is called the state of ignorance, because we don't know anything. So that's why it's saying like there's a stuff covering up the light of awareness in deep sleep. And in this, then they say pure consciousness is the fourth state, and a beautiful phrase here, fourth state or uncontradicted truth. Right? Uncontradicted, it's a beautiful term because the waking state contradicts the dream state. Right? When I'm awake, I say, oh, the dream was false. But we think that's true, but in the dream, we won't even regard the waking state. In the dream state alone is real. In fact, you could even make an argument that the dream is more real than waking, because in dream, you don't even acknowledge this waking state. At least in waking state, we can say, well, there was some reality to the dream. In dream state, you can't even say that. So they contradict each other. And deep sleep contradicts both of them, because deep sleep says, well, there is no projection. What are you talking about? But the state of awareness, which is known as the fourth state, which is not a fourth state, it's of a different order. There are the three states, and there is something of a different order. That remains uncontradicted because I am aware of waking, I am aware of dream, and I'm aware of the non-projection that is sleep. And it is uncontradicted by any state of mind, and that's why it's called the fourth state.
Beautiful. This is my book with Leonard Mlodinow, who co-wrote Grand Design and A Briefer History of Time with Stephen Hawking. And here we represent the two worldviews, the physicalist worldview and the spiritual worldview, where they meet and where they do not. So here are some ideas on what the book is about. It talks about, here I'll just read to you the chapter headings. Spiritual perspective, scientific perspective, how did the universe emerge, is the universe conscious, is the universe evolving, what is the nature of time, is the universe alive, what is life, is there design in the universe, what makes us human, how do genes work, did Darwin go wrong? A lot of people get very upset when I say that. What is the connection between mind and brain? Does the brain dictate behavior? Is the brain like a computer? Is the universe thinking through us? Is God an illusion? What is the future of belief? Is there fundamental reality? And on and on. And Leonard and I became very good friends while writing this book. And he has a new book, by the way, called Elastic. It's about elasticity in thinking, flexibility in thinking. And I'm going to be doing another event with him tomorrow, which will also be here on Facebook. And this is, of course, the current book, The Healing Self, about what is the self that heals. So we will probably end now. Anoop, we've gone on for 45 minutes. But what is the self? What do we mean when we say self?
So when we say self, there are many different selves depending on the context. I would say one popular notion is that of us as individuals. So the sense of individual
Bye,
identity.
Elena Navarro has to go. See you later. Okay. Right.
So,
Self. What is the self? Sorry.
no, that's okay. The sense of individuality is oneself. So when my sense of identity is localized in an individual form as a body or a mind, then that is one definition of self. In Vedanta, we often talk about the self, as in the universal self. So as consciousness, that consciousness from which all of this arises is the self. So there are these different notions of self, and depending on the context, they can mean different things.
But one of the principles in Vedanta also is the self of the individual is the self of the universe.
Yes, Atman is Brahman, we say,
Yeah.
or Tattvamasi,
Mhm.
where that which is individual or that which is localized is also the infinite. And when you go beyond the form of the localized, then automatically you're the infinite. When you take the boundary off of any object, it's no longer finite. You can't localize it anywhere. And that's the principle behind the local self is the universal self.
Okay, so two comments here. One is Aurora Carlson, who's a meditation teacher, and she's an Ayurvedic practitioner, and she's in Sweden. And she's saying, good luck with the debate. Aurora, watch it and hope you'll vote whichever way you feel inclined. And then Rishikesh Dixit from India is saying, go on guys, I could listen to this forever. Well, I think I'll end by asking Anoop, based on Rishikesh's comment, what is time?
So it's interesting, there are different versions of time. One way we look at time is clock time. And clock time is the elapsing between two separate points in awareness. So from midnight until now, so on the East Coast maybe it's around 3 o'clock now. So from midnight until now, 15 hours have elapsed. That's clock time. We take 2 points in awareness and we make a measurement between those points. That's clock time. Nature has a different kind of time. Nature doesn't really know clock time. Nature has rhythm. So you look at the seasons, there's a rhythm to it. If you watch people dancing on a dance floor, nobody's counting seconds, nobody's counting minutes. You're counting, we call it counting time in music, right? Where basically you're counting rhythm. When somebody speaks, there's a cadence to how they speak. If I spoke like this, then it would be, right? If I spoke like that, there's no rhythm to it. So it's hard to get in time with that kind of thinking. So there's these different notions of time. However, whether you're talking about two particular points of awareness and dividing them equally, which is clock time, or whether you're talking about rhythm, you're still talking about an experience in consciousness.
Is consciousness, therefore, the only thing that is timeless, as pure consciousness?
Consciousness is the only thing that is timeless because it's the only thing that's beyond any particularity. So when you have particularity, immediately space and time appear. So me and you are two particulars, immediately space appears. And time is also possible with those 2 points. But if you're going beyond that, that means you're going beyond particulars. That means you're going beyond any boundary. That by definition is infinity, and by definition that is consciousness.
So, every identity that you and I assume is provisional until we get to the identity which is at the root of all identities, which is pure awareness, and that's our real identity, which is not subject to birth or death.
Absolutely. That's I don't know if we can we even say, I know what you mean, I agree with you, but can we even say that's our real identity, right? It is totally beyond the scope of form, of function, of boundary, of concept, right? It's that infinity that's beyond all these things.
Okay, so we're going to say goodbye, but I see that Aurora Carlson has been periodically putting in the link to the debate. Check the link out, it's right here also. Come and join us for the debate. We haven't covered the points we were going to cover in the debate because obviously we want you to come and join us. Vote your opinion on the motion. before the debate, and the motion is
The more we evolve,
the less we need God. And we are against that motion. And then after the debate, you can vote again. And actually, you can vote anytime, as the debate will be living on for a long time in cyberspace. So cyberspace is more subtle than we think it is, right?
Yeah.
And yet it records everything that's
It
happening.
records everything, and one thing is it has no walls, right? When you look at cyberspace, all the walls in cyberspace are imagined. That's why now we're talking about the cloud. What does that mean? It's basically, I don't want to say unfettered access because privacy is important, but we're seeing that there are no such things as walls. Walls are imagined boundaries.
Very well. Thank you, Aurora. Thank you, Rishikesh. Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Gloria. We have all these wonderful friends joining us. Thank you again, Rishikesh. You have a great name, and we will follow up. Now, once the debate is over, you can still go online and vote, and we encourage you that you do so we can expand this conversation, we can bring in others into this conversation, and hopefully we will prevail over the apostles of scientism, such as my friend Michael Sharma. I call him the apostle of scientism. So check out the difference between scientism and science before you come to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you.